Hello YouTube family, thanks for joining me on my videos. If you like the videos, please give me a like. If you've not subscribed, please consider subscribing to the channel to help the channel grow. Thanks for watching the videos. Sincerely, thanks for watching. And that was Kyle Rittenhouse's defense on the stand in his murder trial in Wisconsin. That's my little bit of humor at the start of this video. It's not a particularly funny video, but I put the crying video in there because he cried when he got on the stand, which honestly was probably expected. This video is covering the ongoing trial of Kyle Rittenhouse. He's the now 18-year-old, but last year was a 17-year-old when he traveled from Antioch, Illinois to Kenosha, Wisconsin to play out his hero fantasy of walking up and down the streets with an assault rifle and just being a kid playing out his little hero fantasy, as I said. On that evening, you had, that was the third night, I believe, of the protests in Wisconsin. The protests originated from the police killing of Jacob Blake. He was a black man who had been shot in the back 7 times by a police officer. And upon the national media covering the Jacob Blake killing, it sparked protests, which were honestly, it's carryover from all this other stuff. You had so many killings that caused so many protests. The Black Lives Matter movement became last year a very significant movement because of the killings, high-profile killings that made national media. In this case, you had the Jacob Blake killing, and there were 2 nights of protest. There was rioting that went on, looting, and there was arson that went on. I think a couple of buildings in Kenosha were set on fire. If you listen to someone on the right wing, they'll try and claim something ridiculous like the entire city of Kenosha was burned to the ground, and nothing close to that. As you'll see in some of the videos I play, this is the 3rd night of the protest when the 3 people were shot by Kyle Rittenhouse, and the city's still standing. However, on the night Kyle Rittenhouse went there, he went there under the pretense of protecting a property, a car lot, with a friend, and he was part of a militia group that organized on social media to go there and protect people and property from the protesters. And in the sequence of events, Kyle Rittenhouse ended up shooting 3 people, killing 2 of them. The people he killed were Joseph Rosenbaum and Anthony Huber. He also shot Gage Grosskreutz, however you pronounce his name, in the arm, severely damaging his arm. And before I get on with the video and delve into the issues I'm going to talk about, I have to say that from observing the trial, my opinion is most likely Rittenhouse will end up suffering little to no consequences for what he did. One of the issues I have with the trial is they are viewing his defense as three separate incidents subtracted from the context of the night. They're looking at just the shootings themselves and whether he has a defense of self-defense or not in those incidents without any broader context. You have people that have had issues with the judge in the case. The judge is Bruce Schroeder. He is judge in Kenosha. One of the residents of Kenosha who spoke to a reporter about the case with Kyle Rittenhouse made the statement that I think Rittenhouse is going to get off. They gave the case to the worst judge in town. That's one of the residents of Kenosha. And so on this night, Rittenhouse had his AR-15. That is a weapon that is illegal for him to carry, to possess in Wisconsin. In the state of Wisconsin, if you're under 18, you cannot carry a weapon. And that charge itself is one of the charges against Rittenhouse, illegally carrying a weapon. It's a misdemeanor. It's among the lowest charges he has, among the various charges he's being on trial for. The gun possession charge is a misdemeanor, and from the last thing I read, it looks like that may end up getting wiped out as well, because the judge is allowing the jury, from what I read, to remove that charge if they feel like the prosecution did not do a good enough job in saying that the barrel is short enough to be illegal for him to carry, which is a misunderstanding of the judge, unfortunately, of the law in Wisconsin. And the prosecution really didn't contend on that part. That was kind of a part that was just given up, because during the process of this trial, Rittenhouse admitted to illegally buying and possessing the weapon. He admitted to that himself while he was testifying. And the judge, Rittenhouse's lawyers, had asked for that charge to be dismissed, be able to be dismissed by the jury. The judge said he would give that admonition to the jury that if the prosecution didn't prove that the gun was short enough for it to be illegal for Kyle Rittenhouse, that they can just do away with that charge, the gun possession charge, the illegal gun possession charge. Now, when it comes to the length of the barrel, what the judge is referring to is there are cutouts in the law. And granted, I've read the law on firearms in Wisconsin, and they are convoluted. They're written really weird. So you have the law, you have cutouts within the law, and then the law in Wisconsin is anyone under the age of 18 cannot possess a firearm, a deadly weapon. And however, there are cutouts for long guns in the instance of someone who is 15, 16, or 17 years old going hunting, being under the constant supervision of an adult, or someone who is 15, 16, or 17 years old who is going to firearms training under the constant supervision of an adult. In those instances, you can possess a gun. None of those instances apply to Rittenhouse, so he has just left that it's illegal. In the situation he was in, it was just illegal by the law in Wisconsin. You have right-wing people that disagree with that argue with that, but that's the law in Wisconsin. And so that charge, even though that's open and shut with the way the law is in Wisconsin, could still be wiped out along with everything else that Rittenhouse is accused of. So you have the weapons charge, then you have the charges related to the 3 shootings. And as I said, the court has removed the context of the night to focus solely on the individual act of shooting, which is asinine to me, to say that the events of the night had nothing to do with the events surrounding the shootings. Like they were completely separate from the rest of the night. Because what you had was Rittenhouse walking around. I mean, he and his friends said they were there to protect this particular car lot. However, there are multiple videos of Rittenhouse, weapon in hand, patrolling the streets like he is a military service member on the streets of Fallujah on patrol. Like he's somewhere in the Middle East. He's got his Kabbalah chic outfit on, with his gun, walking around, playing out his hero fantasy. And you have people that night, people that were in the protest group, who had spoke out that Rittenhouse was threatening and harassing them and pointing his gun at them. And that plays a factor into it, because Rittenhouse instigated the bad things that night. I mean, if you take Rittenhouse out of that situation, if you take Rittenhouse and the rest of the militia members that showed up that night out of the situation, there's, 2 people that are still alive, and the Grosskreutz guy still has his full arm. Doesn't have part of his bicep shut off. However, they injected themselves into the evening. Another thing I have an issue with, this idea that somehow vigilante justice is better than letting the police do the work of justice, of keeping the peace. And you could say you're not comfortable with the way the police work. However, vigilantism isn't legal in this country. You have certain things that are legal, like citizens' arrests. However, like this group that said they were going there to protect property, there is a lot of limitations on protecting property. And that's where these guns, these ridiculous right-wingers like to play with, come into play. The Supreme Court has already ruled that life has precedence over property. I'll explain that, and that is, if you see somebody with a Molotov cocktail about to throw it through the window of a car that's sitting there empty, say it's a car on a car lot for sale, just an empty car lot, empty car, somebody's about to throw a Molotov cocktail through the window, you can't shoot and kill that person to keep them from burning the car, because that person's life is more important than the property they're going to destroy. That's the whole thing with this, is there are limits to what you can do as far as using deadly force. Not only do you have to say you were scared, the force you use has to be justifiable in that you felt like you were going to die if you didn't kill this other person. And in this case, the prosecution has done a rather poor job of making the state's case. And then the judge has seemed to be somewhat heavy-handed on the side of Kyle Rittenhouse. And I will bring up a couple of quotes from Ellie Mistal, a justice correspondent for The Nation. And in these quotes, there is a explanation of issues Mistal is taking with the judge's handling in the case. The first quote is here, and that is, I can absolutely see the argument that using the term, and the term that is being discussed here is victims, that using the term in a case where the defendant claims self-defense lacks neutrality, it's a choice other judges have made, though I doubt this kind of neutrality would be given to a black teen who gunned down people at a MAGA rally. Still, I wouldn't call Schroeder biased for his ruling alone. I call Schroeder biased because at the same conference at which he decided to prohibit the prosecution from using the word victims, and that's the term that's being discussed here, is using the term victims, to describe people Rittenhouse shot. He said he would allow the defense to use words like rioters, looters, and arsonists to describe those same people. That's BS. The victims are not on trial. Rittenhouse is. Refusing to allow prosecutors to use linguistically accurate terms for people who did not voluntarily attempt to catch a bullet with their face, at the same time as allowing the defense to use prejudicial language to characterize what those people were doing at the time, is the very definition of bias. There is not and never will be a trial to determine whether Anthony Huber, Joseph Rosenbaum were arsonists, looters, or rioters because Rittenhouse killed them in the street. Indeed, the sole surviving victim of Rittenhouse's gunfire, Gage Grosskreutz, has not been charged with rioting, looting, or arson, or any crime whatsoever arising out of the protests in Kenosha. And the second quote is here, which is, at the same time Schroeder announced that he would not allow prosecutors to introduce evidence of Rittenhouse's prior disposition to shoot people to death. There is video of Rittenhouse watching from a car as people leave a CVS. He calls them looters and says that he wishes he had a gun to shoot them. The video was taken in August of 2020, about 2.5 weeks before Rittenhouse shot up the streets of Kenosha. I think it was around 15 days prior when that video was shot. There are also photos from January 2020 of Rittenhouse posing with members of the Proud Boys. Both the video and the photos will be excluded, but the police patting Rittenhouse on the head like a good little white supremacist will be included. So it's things like that were taken out. I mean, to say that it wouldn't be somehow fair to show the mindset of Rittenhouse, that it would somehow be unfair to Rittenhouse to show a mindset he had leading up to the events that he's on trial for, is absurd. And this photo to my left is what Ms. Dahl was talking about in the second quote, which is, after Kyle Rittenhouse was released on $2 million bond, he and his mother showed up on social media at a bar, hanging out. Rittenhouse was wearing this t-shirt that you see in the picture that says "Free as F" on it. And he was high-fiving these Proud Boys that were hanging out at the bar. They were serenading him. And he and his mom were hanging out at a bar. He's also not old enough to go into a bar and drink. I don't know that he drank there. Hopefully not. But there's a pattern, not only of misbehavior, but of horrible decisions on the part of Rittenhouse. And just to go into, since I brought up the video, I'll go ahead and play the CBS video. This is around 15 days prior to the Kenosha shootings by Rittenhouse. He and a friend observing a CVS pharmacy.
Bro, I wish I had my phone in the car. I'd start shooting rounds at them.
But in that video, I don't know, the audio is kind of crappy on the video, but that's the video that was being referenced. That's the video that the prosecution was upset was not allowed in court. I hope you were able to hear it, but if not, that was Kyle Rittenhouse with a friend observing people in a CVS. Rittenhouse's verbal speculation was that they were looting the CVS, which he really doesn't know whether they were or not. He doesn't know who they were, what they were doing while they were there. But he made the comment that if he had his AR, he would shoot some rounds at them. If he had his effing AR, he would shoot some rounds at them. And that's the mindset 15 days before he shoots 3 people. I mean, it's showing a pattern in this guy's mind, how he views the world, and what really excites him. And what excites him is not going to Kenosha to act as a paramedic. You know, that's his excuse for being there, was that he was there to provide protection for this car lot and to help people who were injured because he had a medic bag. He also claims that he is going to college, that he's enrolled in college to, I believe, be a nurse, and that was fact-checked. Reporters contacted the college. They said he is not enrolled there, and among other things. I mean, but the kids, you know, claiming that he went there to protect people. And one of the other claims he made, which was a lie, was saying that he had body armor that he gave to a friend, expressing that he didn't believe he would need the body armor that night because he was just there to help people who were in need. So he gave his friend the body armor, and his claim was that the body armor was given to him in this young cadets police program he had gone through in high school, where I'm sure some of you who watch this have heard of it. They have these programs to have kids do ride-alongs with police officers and things in cities and towns across the country. He did one of these programs. He claimed to have gotten this, that he was issued the vest by the police department when he was in that program. And again, reporters contacted the police chief of the department he was working with, and the police chief expressed that no, we do not issue body armor to cadets in this program, because the thing is, this is ride-alongs for high school kids with cops. The police department is not going to send a police unit that has a high school kid doing a ride-along on a dangerous call. If they think there's going to be trouble, that's not the call that the cop with the high school kid's going to show up for. But the thing is, they had the ability to purchase body armor, and this is not a huge deal. Just the fact that Kyle Rittenhouse is lying, and he was caught in multiple lies like that, claiming that he had training that he didn't have, claiming that he was going to a school for a degree that he's not enrolled in, and claiming that he was issued body armor by the police department, when the police chief said, we don't issue body armor to high school kids in this program. They can purchase body armor if they choose to, but we don't issue it. And that's just simple lies that happen, but it is what it is, I guess. And in the end, there are people who now are idolizing Kyle Rittenhouse, looking at him as some kind of hero and some kind of celebrity, like in this picture here. This is another photograph from the, or a steal from the video shot at the bar that was posted on social media, where you have these guys taking their picture with him, high-fiving him and stuff. And it's really disgusting the way we elevate someone like Rittenhouse. These people are celebrating him because he murdered people they politically, socially, ideologically disagree with. So they're excited because he killed the ideological enemy for them. And let's go through some video footage from the incidents and finish out this video.
Someone injured straight ahead. Get out of the road! Get down there! God damn it!
And so that was a video I'm sure you've seen. It was broadcast on every cable news, local news. It's all over social media. And that's a very common video. It's where Kyle Rittenhouse had already killed Rosenbaum. He was running down the street. And if you noticed, as he's running down the street, Huber comes across and appears to strike him with a skateboard as he's running down the street. Rittenhouse is running towards the police. And there's a bit obvious reason for that. He views the police as being on his side. Earlier in the evening, the police were thanking them for being there, these militia people. They were giving them water. He's running towards his team, the way he looks at it. The police are on his side. And you have these people that are chasing him, if you heard in the video, trying to yell ahead at the police that this guy just killed somebody. He just shot this guy over here. And that's one of the things that I didn't see them really addressing in the trial, is the fact that when Rittenhouse killed Rosenbaum, when he shot Rosenbaum, there wasn't a big crowd there. People make it out like there was a mob chasing him in the first shooting, which isn't the case. Very few people there. People started gathering once they heard the gunfire, and then they started trying to help Rosenbaum, who was bleeding in the head. And for the majority of the people who are there, the protesters, at that point, they don't know what necessarily happened, why Rosenbaum was shot. All they know is somebody just murdered somebody else, just shot him. They, for all they knew, Rosenbaum was going to live, but they knew Kyle Rittenhouse had just shot the guy, and he was running down the street towards cops. Excuse me. You had the people who were chasing after him, quotes, who were trying to alert the police who were up ahead that he had shot somebody. Not that the police cared. I mean, apparently the police in Kenosha, Wisconsin are the worst. Just horrible at their jobs because, I mean, Kyle Rittenhouse got in a car and went home that night after killing 2 people and wounding a third. But that's the common videos you see. One thing that was brought up during the trial was this drone video, and let's go through that. And that was the drone video footage they were talking about in court. They were looking at in court. And the judge is going to consider whether to admonish the jury to allow for lower level charges, because as you saw in the drone video, prior to Rosenbaum, on the video from the upper left, you saw the 2 figures. The first one was Rittenhouse, followed by Rosenbaum. As they came into the picture, Rittenhouse raised his gun at Rosenbaum when Rosenbaum really wasn't close enough to touch Rittenhouse, which once Rittenhouse raises his weapon at Rosenbaum, at that point Rosenbaum, one thing that a lot of people aren't taking into consideration in a lot of these shootings, has the ability to defend himself as well. There's speculation he reached out to grab the barrel of the gun. There's people that claim he wasn't close enough to reach the barrel of the gun. One of the experts said he was probably within 4 feet of being able to reach the gun when he started getting shot. And but Rittenhouse clearly raised the weapon up when he turned around and saw Rosenbaum coming at him. Now, Rosenbaum was a guy who was recently released from a mental facility, where he was being treated prior to this. There was you may have heard people talking about he threw a plastic bag at Rittenhouse. The plastic bag that he threw had possessions of his that were given back to him when he was released from the mental facility. He was kind of a loose cannon in all this. Rosenbaum was a disturbed individual. You can hear multiple accounts from people at night. Protesters, police, some of those militia people. He was yelling at everybody. He was just angry. He was just angry and agitated and had whatever issues he had going on in his head. But he... As far as I know, there's no indication he was there for the Black Lives Matter rally or protest. He wasn't there as a protester. He was just there as an agitator. But there's also no indication that he was going to become violent. He had yelled threats at people. Some of them were substantiated, some weren't. Rittenhouse claims he made threats at him that there's just no footage of. making these threats. But everybody agreed that he was a disturbed individual who was just there, presumably because whatever his psychosis is, civil unrest is something he will get into and throw his brand of crazy into the mix. He was the first one shot. And like I said, as you can see there were very few people there. Primarily it was Rittenhouse and Rosenbaum. There was a reporter for a right-wing online rag who was close by. If you see some of the other clips of that shooting, he's the guy who's taking his shirt off to try and put pressure on the wounds of Rosenbaum. That's the reporter from the right-wing rag. It's called the Daily Caller. I have another video I'm going to play from that right-wing online website. They were there that night, and they interviewed some of these militia members, and one of them was Kyle Rittenhouse. They interviewed Kyle Rittenhouse. They followed him. And the thing is, people know when they're being recorded. You know, you have a reporter and a cameraman who has a light shining on you, a camera, a microphone, and they're interviewing you. So what the Daily Caller guy got from Kyle Rittenhouse was a highlight reel version of Kyle Rittenhouse. Kyle Rittenhouse was going to be on his best behavior with that guy because he was recording it for a online, right-wing online website. And again, that website is the Daily Caller. And I'll go ahead and play that video, because that, to me, the Daily Caller video shows something else that's not brought up in court. And we can discuss that once we get through with the video.
You were just the one talking about get out the car, trying to help you out the car. Now you trying to do better? I don't remember you. You said get out the car. Fuck you talking about middle? Yeah. Your ass is cool.
Everybody, you gotta go.
I'm trying to turn motherfuckers. These guys thought it was sweet.
Gotta go.
What, yesterday or today?
Today. Dude, he just had up the gun talking about get off the car. Now he talking about middle.
What car? Over in the dealership? Sorry, I don't know.
And so in that video, what you saw was the Daily Caller reporter and cameraman were following Rittenhouse as he was explaining to them that he's just there to help people. He's there to be a medic. And he was walking down the street, came up to some of these protesters, and started saying, "Do you need help?" And you had the protesters saying, "Wait a minute, you were just pointing your gun at us a minute ago telling us to get out of a car. What the heck's going on here?" And that's one of the things that is not being presented in court. His mindset at the CVS and this kind of stuff. This is a genuine interaction. This is a camera and a reporter following Rittenhouse around. And when he walks up to these protesters to offer a medical help, they're like, wait a minute. You're the guy walking around here threatening us with your gun, and now all of a sudden you're asking us if we need help? And that's the genuine kind of thing, context from this night that's not being introduced into court. Because Rittenhouse was playing a certain role on camera for that online news source. And when he walked up to demonstrate his good boy medic, I'm just here to help persona, the protesters who remembered him from earlier pointing his gun at them were like, wait a second, that's not who you've been so far. And they're not making the connection that, oh, he's on camera right now, so now he's being the good guy. When the camera is not recording him, he's being his little a-ho self. And that's one of the things that's not being presented in court. And so you have a rather clear picture of who Rittenhouse is. Rittenhouse is this immature 17-year-old boy with these hero fantasies in his head that he's going to go there with his Cabela chic outfit on, with his AR-15, and he's going to get to threaten, intimidate people that he ideologically disagrees with. And he gets to pretend to be a tough guy because everybody's a tough guy when they're armed, right? They're not so much of a tough guy when they're not armed. And that interaction struck me over a year ago, back when this stuff first happened. I saw that video online, and I was like, wait a second. These guys are like, oh, you were just pointing your gun at us, now you want to help us? And that's what struck me as Rittenhouse, was going around antagonizing people. He was interjecting the prospect of violence into what was a protest, a very toxic civil unrest situation. And then when somebody responded, the first person that responded was Rosenbaum, who was clearly off mentally. And it's somebody like that who will respond, despite the fact that this kid has a lethal weapon. And that's where self-defense, for me, doesn't work. When you create the bad situation, you don't then get to say it's self-defense. You know what self-defense is? Staying in Antioch, Illinois, because none of this was going on there. You were completely safe. You were defending yourself perfectly well if you stayed in your room in Antioch as a 17-year-old kid. As I said in my first Rittenhouse video, if you really wanted to help people and property, at the same time this was going on in Wisconsin, the whole West Coast was on fire. California, Oregon, Washington State, massive fires, people dying, property getting lost. He could have volunteered to go out there and fight fires. But there's no glory in that. There's no getting to go around and carry your AR, your effing AR, that you can shoot rounds at people you don't like, that people you disagree with, people that you assume are criminals just by looking at them. That's the thing. Going to this situation, Rittenhouse got to do what he wanted to do. He got to play out his hero fantasy. Going to the West Coast to volunteer to fight fires. He might die there. He was looking at this situation as, I've got a military-style weapon. I'm not going to die. I'm going to this situation in Wisconsin because I get to have fun with my gun. That's the problem we have in this country, that people aren't realizing. The problem that's going to persist, that's going to get worse if Rittenhouse, as everyone's expecting, ends up getting acquitted of these charges. It's going to be worse. So let's go through the some of the court proceedings. And this is just prosecution questioning Rittenhouse.
Him break down on the stand with emotion. I'd like to probe how heartfelt and sincere these emotions are when you go to a bar and you pose for selfies with people, when you're out on bond in a first-degree intentional homicide trial wearing a free as fuck shirt. That after the police pushed everybody south to 60th, you never saw any people threatening that property, correct?
I didn't see anybody.
And your goal that night, you took it upon yourself to protect the 59th Street property, correct?
The owners asked.
Sure. But you were going to station yourself at that property to try and protect it from damage, fair?
The car source locations, yes.
And once the police had pushed everybody south of that, there was no more danger.
At that car source location, yes.
Okay. So why not go home at that point?
Because the police were still pushing people back, and then they were backing up, and I was still helping people provide medical first aid.
Okay, so the police had established the line at 60th with their Bearcats at that point.
right?
Yes.
And there was no indication that they were going to reverse and back up and move back north again that you saw, correct?
No, they did it earlier in the night where they did the same thing.
Right, but this is at 11:30, 11:40 at night, and they've established that, the police have established that line, and as far as you can tell, it's going to stay there, right?
I don't know.
And you talked about trying to provide medical help, but there's no one around that needs medical help at the 59th Street car source at that point, is there?
Not that I noticed.
So you don't have any purpose there anymore, do you?
Other than...
So why not go home?
Because I was going to help people provide first aid and medical assistance.
But that wasn't the reason you were there that night. You were there that night to protect the 59th Street car source.
It was one of the reasons I was there. Part of my reasons of being there was to protect the car source properties and provide first aid and medical assistance. Going to be attacked and ambushed.
But you just said you had it for protection. What were you expecting you would need protection from?
I thought we had covered much of this before.
I'm specifically focusing in on the time period where he is heading down to the 63rd Street car source. I have not asked him about this yet, Your Honor.
Well, go ahead, but you need to pick up the pace somewhat.
So there was some of the questioning from the prosecution, and Rittenhouse had some issues trying to explain why he kept being there through the night when the police were moving their position further and further down the street, blocking off part of the street. And one of the problems with that was, on the police's part, was they were pushing the militia and the protesters into a smaller and smaller area, getting them closer and closer together, kind of like, putting the ingredients for an explosion together. And this video of Rittenhouse, one of the issues I have with the whole Rittenhouse thing is the trial. You look at these various images, videos of Rittenhouse, and he has this insanely smug look on his face. He is a kid who feels like, I'm going to get away with this. I went to Wisconsin, I killed 2 people and injured another, and I'm going to get away with it. I mean, we are creating a potentially horrible person in all of this. But let's go ahead and play the last video, which is the crying video that people have probably seen plenty of.
I wasn't.
Describe what happens.
Once I take that step back, I look over my shoulder, and Mr. Rosenbaum was now running from my right side, and I was cornered in front of me with Mr. Zeminski, and there were people right there.
Take a deep breath, pal.
That's what that's where I run.
We're going to just take time for our break anyway. You can just relax for a minute, sir. We're going to take a break about 10 minutes, and please don't talk about the case during the break. Read, watch, or listen to any account of the trial.
And so that was a video where he was giving his testimony. It was the defense that was asking the questions, and he started his sobbing fit. You could see the camera panning to his mother, who had her face in her hands crying. And apparently, she is the one that drove her son to Kenosha that night and dropped him off so he could go roam the streets of Fallujah, Wisconsin with his assault weapon, with his effing AR. And you've had people speculate whether he was really crying, whether it was an act. Some people choose not to chime in. I am not one of those people. I'm going to chime in. I'm going to say it's complete BS. I mean, what I saw when he was doing the sobbing stuff, one, as LeBron James pointed out, there were no tears. He feels no sympathy. One of the statements that Kyle Rittenhouse made on the stand was, "I did nothing wrong," when everything he did that night was wrong. But there's no tears. He feels no sympathy for what he did. He feels no empathy for the people he killed. I mean, you could see him in the video in that bar where he's smiling and enjoying all the attention he's getting for having killed these ideological enemies. I mean, let's face it, the January 6th was hundreds of people breaking into the Capitol to try and kill ideological enemies. Unfortunately, that's republicanism nowadays. That's where the Republican Party is at. That's where the right wing is at. The right wing is becoming more and more unhinged and right wing. But what I was trying to show in this video was more context. What the trial was missing was a lot of the context leading up to that night and that night. Instead, they were trying to analyze just these 3 shootings in a vacuum, subtracted from the context of who this kid is and the context of the night that was transpiring. And like in the video from the Daily Caller, what you saw was the protesters, when he was offering help, was like, "What? You're pointing your gun at us 1 minute, you're asking us if we need help the next? Who are you?" I mean, what you saw there was a genuine interaction. People responding to this kid, trying to play up for the camera that was recording him. And when he didn't get a response that fit his narrative that he was portraying to the camera, he just turned and walked away. He was trying to present a certain image to that film crew for the Daily Caller. And Kyle Rittenhouse is a bad person. Sorry. I mean, you can hate me all you want. Kyle Rittenhouse is a bad person. My fear years ago in the George Zimmerman stuff was that if he doesn't get any charges, if he serves no time for murdering a 17-year-old kid in Trayvon Martin, he's going to be a monster to deal with. And all George Zimmerman has been is a monster since that time. Same thing with Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse already is being portrayed as a superhero by the right wing. Not just a hero, a superhero. Like, he's somebody they idolize because he got to kill. If he gets away with this and suffers no consequences, then he got to kill the ideological enemy and get away with it. He got to get away with murder if he walks. And odds are very good with the way the trial went that he will walk. Not because of, and you have plenty of right-wingers. I just watched a debate earlier today with a group of 4 right-wingers and 4 left-wingers over this trial. And the right-wingers' perspective was the same as Rittenhouse. He did nothing wrong. He should have been there. He had every right to be there. He had every right to kill people. That was their perspective. That's the right wing now. That's their perspective. You have every right to kill the people you disagree with. You can antagonize them. You can provoke them. And if they respond, you get to kill them and claim self-defense. That's what the Republican Party has set up. You can kill anybody you want as long as you set it up in a way where you can claim self-defense. Which, it's not supposed to work that way. Self-defense doesn't include you being the antagonist. You can't goad somebody into attacking you so you can then kill them and claim self-defense. It's not supposed to work that way, but unfortunately it's playing out that way. The judge is horrible. There are people that defend the judge. You have legal people in Kenosha that defend the judge. You have legal people, and citizens in Kenosha. They're like, no, he's the worst. He's horrible. But he's made some horrible decisions as the judge in this case. The prosecution has totally dropped the ball in allowing the defense to take all of the context out of the night. And what you have on the right are people wanting him to get away with it because that's their ideology. That's their ideology is whether they're right-wing, Republican, Libertarian. They feel like Rittenhouse did. Rittenhouse got on the stand and said, I did nothing wrong. He believes it. You have plenty of right-wing people who also believe it. All this violent, gun-loving, gun-worshipping BS that's seeping through the right-wing in our society is becoming horrible. And it's leading to something bad. And an acquittal of this kid is also going to lead to something horrible. And unfortunately, there will probably be riots in Kenosha if he gets acquitted. There will be people upset, people out in the streets. Some people will be peaceful, and some people will not be. And some of the people who are not peaceful don't give a damn about this trial and didn't even pay attention to it. They're just out there to cause trouble. But some of the people who are rioting will be people who do care. And it's because stuff like this bothers them as much as it bothers me, as much as it bothers other people, that someone like Rittenhouse can go into the situation, create a worse situation, kill a couple of people, and then get away with it. And as far as the decision-making of Rittenhouse, I said everything he did was wrong, and that starts with traveling to Kenosha in the midst of civil unrest to pick up your illegally purchased AR-15 because he had somebody who could legally buy it for him. According to Rittenhouse, he used stimulus money he got to pay for the gun. He gave the money to a friend who could legally buy it. The friend held it for him. When he traveled to Kenosha, he picked the gun up to go play out his hero fantasy. Supposedly that's how the gun purchase went down. Supposedly his mother drove him and dropped him off that night in Kenosha. Then his mother, after he got released on $2 million bond, was hanging out in a bar with her son and some Proud Boys. It's insane. Insane. And this is the guy who was sitting outside that CVS about 15 days before he killed two people. That I think they're looting. I think they're robbing the place. If I had my effing AR, I'd shoot some rounds at them. That's the mindset he has. It all adds up to a horrible person going into a horrible situation. Is Kyle Rittenhouse a lost cause? No. I believe everybody can be redeemed. He just has to be taken out of the right-wing rabbit hole he's fallen down into. He's young enough. He's got plenty of life ahead of him to make something of himself. Hopefully I'm wrong, and even if he's acquitted, he will go down a different path. I don't see that happening because he's going to be a right-wing hero celebrity. He's going to be on Fox News. I wouldn't be surprised to see him, showing up at Republicans' campaigns. Republicans having him show up and speak at their events when they're running for re-election. I wouldn't be surprised to see this kid running as a Republican for public office, trying to be a representative for either Illinois or Wisconsin. I mean, his mother lives in Illinois. His father lives in Kenosha, Wisconsin, where the violence happened at. But it's adding up to something horrible. And anyway, that's my take on the whole case. Thanks for watching. I hope you made it to the end. If you did, please give me a like. Leave me comments. You can disagree with me. You can agree with me. You know, let me know how I'm doing. It's been a while since I've posted. I've been working 60-hour work weeks at my job, so I just haven't had the time to put in the work to gather all the digital assets to put the video together like I want to. And yeah, thanks for watching. Please give me a subscribe if you like my videos. Give me a like and leave a comment. You can agree, disagree, that's fine. But anyway, thanks for watching. Have a good day.